Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Not a Roadrunner. So it has been a while. I have definitely lost my train of being on time with uploading videos. So I'm really sorry about that, guys. But today is a little bit of maintenance for the Plymouth. So we're going to do I want to check the quality of the coolant. So if the coolant's all right, we'll just change it because the radiator has a massive gap. So I think when the previous owner replaced the radiator, they just put how much fluid was supposed to be in it rather than actually filling the radiator, because they put a bigger one on, which defeats the whole point. But what we're going to do is we're going to drain it and then refill it. If it's not any good, then we'll do a flush of the radiator, but I think it should be all right because, you know, when we added the temperature sensor, the color looked okay. But we'll see how it goes, because basically I'm hoping it will help. I'm also planning on making a shroud at some point, but when we're sitting running along, we're about 110 degrees Celsius or to 120. But then when I sit in traffic, I'll show you on the gauge, it's right off the end, so it's like 140, 150 when we're sitting at a standstill, which I'm hoping that we can possibly bring down slightly. I mean, I know it's an old car, but I am hoping that we can bring that down a little bit. So let's get to it. Let's go and have a little investigation, and I'll just bring you along for the ride. Let's get to it. So when we're cruising along at, you know, like a nice 60-70 mile an hour speed, we're right around here. So a nice, like, I don't know, 110. I mean, what's that, 30? Yeah, 50, so about, yeah, 115 around here. So that's pretty good. But then when we come into traffic, we're up here or possibly past it, which is, you know, 145, 150, which is quite hot. So what I'm hoping for is to get that past. I mean, if that doesn't help, then maybe we'll replace the thermostat. When I had a look at it, it looked pretty fine. I mean, it's definitely opening. I guess it just depends on what temperature it's opening at. But what we're going to do is we're going to change the coolant first. If that doesn't work, then we'll come back for the thermostat. And if that doesn't work, we'll go for the shroud and then electric fans, and we'll just keep going until we can manage to get this down to a nice 90 to 110 all the time.
So these cars have a super simple cooling system. So you've got your radiator, you've got your thermostat in there, which then obviously releases the fluid into the top of the radiator when it gets too hot. And then at the bottom you have a hose which sends the coolant back into the engine, which is all driven by the water pump pulley, which has a manual fan attached to it. But first rule of thumb when doing anything to do with a coolant system is do not do it hot. Definitely do not let it run before you attempt to take the radiator cap off, because they can explode. But as you can see here from inspection, when I had a look at it earlier, the previous owner obviously did not fill the radiator up completely, which may be why we are struggling with excess temperatures.
I have no idea how much water we actually need and how much coolant we actually need, because it says somewhere between like 15 and 18 litres, so I guess that's probably for a full fill as well, you know, engine and heater matrix. But we're going to go for this concentrate and make sure that you've got deionized water. It says battery top up water, but when I read the back, it basically just says deionized for acid, so it doesn't really matter, it's just deionized water, that's all that really matters. And we're going to use that tub, and we're not even going to bother jacking it up because I think that tub will fit underneath it. So cut the top off the box because it was a bit too tall, but now slot that there, and then we've got the drain cloth there, which is right there, which is only by hand anyway. So we'll undo that and drain the coolant out. Let's see how this goes.
So to make sure that we're getting all of the coolant out of this radiator and out of those hoses, I decided to take off the bottom hose, which is the in hose for the engine, just to make sure that there isn't any residual lying in that hose. But we obviously need the bucket to catch it, so let's turn off the drain on the other side and move the bucket over. In case you was wondering, it definitely was worth it, because as you can tell from this sound, there was plenty of coolant sitting in this hose, which was old. So with that all drained, now we just need to put the hose back on and tighten it back up, and then we can look at refilling the radiator. So previously when I've done this, I've tried to mix it myself before it goes into the coolant system, but in this instance, we are literally just pouring it into a radiator, which is going to just mix in there once the water pump starts pumping it around. But the first thing I'm going to do is put the deionized water in, because then I can check and make sure there's no leaks from where I've took the hose off and put it back on, because obviously deionized water is a lot cheaper than coolant.
We're going for the minus 18 degrees because we have no need for any more. So it's 33 to 67. So one of these goes with 4 litres of water.
So as you can see there, it is a ethylene glycol and water mix, which needs to be good down to minus 20. So the Coma coolant that I bought is ethylene glycol, so they should match up pretty sweet. I did get told that when you mix the wrong 2 types of coolant, that it turns into sort of like a porridge mix. So what I did was actually poured some of the new coolant into the bucket of old coolant that we drained to make sure that it didn't turn into a porridge mix before I added it to my radiator. But with all of that figured out, now it is just the case of adding all of the coolant to your radiator that you need. I actually ended up buying a lot more, I guess, than I actually needed, because you know, it's so hard to find the specs on these 1972 cars. But what I did end up doing was I ended up adding more coolant than I should have done, but then that just means I'm protected down to a lower degrees, because obviously we went for 33 to 67, but if you added it 50-50 or whatever, then you just end up being more protected, so it didn't actually matter. So I thought it might be a bright idea to decant our bucket into the 2 bottles, because then it would give me a gist of how much fluid actually needs to go into the radiator. So don't get me wrong, I did actually spill quite a fair bit when I was doing this, because I'm just a klutz, but it ended up being about maybe 6 litres that came out of it. So like I said, I miscalculated how much I needed to put in. So we're going to let it run with the cap off to make sure that any air that was introduced into the system is flushed out, so that we don't see that level drop, and then we can just top it up and then put the cap back on. So there was a pretty significant level drop, so I topped it up, but then I topped it up assuming it would drop again, and it didn't. So we're just going to put the cap back on, and you know, if it spills out a little bit, it's fine. I'll just clean it up after.
Okay, so we've run it for a fair, God, sun today, 6.5 minutes. To be honest, it's more like 10. I started that clock a bit late, and we are sitting around about 90 degrees, which for this car is actually pretty good. It's very slowly climbed up, so maybe I'll take it for a test drive. I'll let you know how it goes, you know, because 115 on a run and then 140 in traffic. We'll see if we get any better, but either way, at least the radiator is now full up, and it does seem to be cooling a bit better, so wins all round. And that concludes today's episode, guys. So thank you for watching. I mean, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something about your coolant system today. To be honest, the coolant systems now in this car are easier to work on than the newer cars, but it is the same basic principles which I explained in the video. So I hope you enjoyed the episode. Hopefully this is the first step to getting our cooling system running really, really cold. I don't mind that much that it's running a bit hot, but it's more peace of mind. I just want to make sure that, you know, everything is ready for when we eventually start getting into engine mods, because you don't want to upgrade your engine and then end up having to then upgrade all your cooling system because it can't cope with what you've already got done to the engine. So we're trying to do it in the right order. I'm trying to do all the supporting mods first, but I hope you enjoyed the episode. Please like, subscribe and share, and I will see you in the next episode. Cheers, guys.